Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom,
Oh,
Marika.
hello.
Hello. Okay. Today we will do the Q&A for our previous presentation, which was part one of the Melchizedek. I don't remember the title
Priesthood.
specifically.
Priesthood.
The Melchizedek priesthood. Yes, and we went through the covenant. Yes. What was the covenant, and that, the forever and ever covenant. No. And the other part of the law, which was given after the blood ratifying, uh, yes, the blood ratifying. Okay. So people will have to go and watch that if they haven't watched it, so they can follow the Q&A, definitely. All right. So I went through it again, and I wrote down. They're not all questions. Some I just need some more clarification, let's say, on some of the things that you have mentioned. And I would like to start, first of all, because we're referring to covenants. Would you give me a definition of what is a covenant? Why are we calling it covenant? In Greek, it's a very specific word that it refers to, what's the English word? When someone dies and you inherit something,
Oh, well,
Their
a
last
will.
estate. Mhm.
Yes. So in Greek, that's the word for a covenant, and that's how we call it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, like the old will and the new will. That's how it's called. So that's why I'm asking for a clarification. What exactly is a covenant? What do we mean when we're saying a covenant?
It's a statement of faith, a statement of being, a statement of what has been laid down as what will be according to your thoughts, your beliefs, and your structure and how you lead your life. It's a promise to yourself, if you will, of how your life is going to be structured. This is who I am. This is how I've laid it out, and this is how it will be. That's what I understand as a covenant. It's an agreement.
It's
Mhm.
an agreement.
And I understand it as well, going a little further, that in a covenant, there's always at least two parties. There can be more, but there has to be at least two that come into an agreement of whatever they are agreeing on. And in the scriptures, when we were talking about a covenant agreement, it was Yahuwah that was asking the people to be his people and to come into this agreement to accept him as their leader and their Elohim and to follow his ways. And in response to that, he said, I will bless you. I will have all these blessings if you come in and be obedient. So there's always at least two parties, at least two.
With because people say that there was a covenant with Adam, there was a covenant with Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Were they the second party?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
For example, Noah, did he have to agree? He didn't ask him to agree with anything. He just told him, from now on, I will no longer, destroy the earth with water. And here's my bow, my rainbow. That's my covenant. So how do we understand covenant in that context?
His agreement is in how he acted out his life according to that agreement. And that was his accepting of the agreement. He he taught that word for many years. He built that boat for the ark. That was his agreement. That this is my portion. This is what I do to our agreement. That's
Mm-hmm.
how I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then later, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kim.
Go ahead. I'm looking for something too.
Oh,
So
okay. And then later, when Nimrod comes on the scene and he builds the Tower of Babel in his rebellion, you can tell by whether the person or the people are in rebellion or in acceptance, whether they're inside the covenant or outside the covenant. So it's by their actions. So we don't necessarily always have to have the words that's, from Noah that I am in covenant, because his testimony of his life and what he did and how he lived in righteousness shows that he was walking and living in covenant. That's why those testimonies, we call them testimonies, but they're just the Bible stories in the scriptures. That's why they're so important, because they show you how that king, the leader, the people are in covenant or not. Is by their witness, what's written down. And the Bible doesn't cover up anything. It has been written to show, when someone has sinned, it has been written down to show what the consequences are. And the other thing too to remember is that we're dealing with 4,000 years of sin in the Old Testament of the scriptures. So those testimonies that were written down and saved are just a few out of the whole 4,000 years. But those are the ones that were preserved because they've got lessons for us in those journeys, the journeys of those people. Mhm.
Understand.
Mhm.
We found it.
I can't find what I'm looking for, but I might later. But I mean, I always think of covenant like marriage covenant. It's binding. So remember how even marriage at some point their divorce was allowed, but in the beginning it was not so. It's a binding agreement,
Mhm.
like husband and wife, unless one, well, even, I mean, anyway, that's how I see it. I see it different than like an treaty agreement, different than, like I don't know, an agreement that a contractor would have with a, I can't think of the right word, but we'll build you this building, we'll do this, and if we don't, then, I think it's
Mhm.
even than that. It's not even like that. It's
Mhm.
and that Yah will fulfill, no matter what, he will fulfill what he says. He does always fulfill his word. That's how I see covenant. The other party, they might not.
Mhm.
I mean, they should. That's part of the covenant. If they don't, they can suffer some consequences, but he will no matter what. He does not go against his word. That's how I see covenant.
Mhm.
And I just think of contracting because my husband was a contractor, and if he didn't fulfill something within a certain time period, as he said in the agreement, then there might be a fine every day that the job is not finished.
Mhm.
I don't, as a covenant, I see it differently because because Yah will finish what he says on time. He will not be any early or late. And so it's different.
Yeah, I understand.
That's neat that you said that, Kim, as related to a marriage covenant, because the whole story of the scriptures is about the bride and the bridegroom.
Yeah.
It's that wonderful wedding of all weddings of the whole universe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. So a covenant requires a specific context, since we have different covenants in different periods in history. It requires a specific context, or not. Is it for a specific time and place, or it can be a general one?
Mm.
Yes.
Yes, it can be a general one.
It can be general and it can be very highly specific.
Mhm.
Take Jonah. Jonah was chosen to do his job and he rebelled. He went against it. He was not in agreement with the commission, and he was brought into agreement. And so his context was He was to be a servant for Yahuwah, and he didn't want to be. He was afraid for his own reasons. He was brought into submission. He went there. He did that. Yahuwah gave him a plant for shade, and the shade was taken away. And again, he was rebellious. He was upset. He was angry, and he was brought into submission again. It's Yahuwah was bringing him into covenant, I guess is what it is. He was bringing him into covenant, into an agreement with Yahuwah, because Yahuwah knew the value of that of Jonah. It was he was forming the man, I guess is what it is, into an agreement.
That was specific.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so the covenant in Mount Sinai, is it specific? Because it sounds specific. You read it as specific.
Mhm.
Highly specific.
Yes. Yes, notice my words. I'm saying it reads as if it's specific. I may be wrong, but it reads as if it's something very specific for this specific context, with these specific people, for this specific time period. And this is the context. Because we have the Israelites in the base of the mountain, and part of this covenant is the conquest. And I will deliver you to your promised land. And in that promised land, you have these blessings if you're in covenant. And, so this sounds specific.
Mhm.
I'm not sure whether now this specific covenant, how we can say that, yeah, it writes, you can read it as if it's specific, but its symbolism is general. I can understand that.
But the covenant wasn't just for the Hebrews, it was also for the great multitude that came out of Egypt that were pagans. They saw what was happening between the gods that they were worshiping,
Mhm.
this great Elohim. They
Yeah.
saw these 10 plagues, they saw what happened. And so, yes, it was specific, but he was calling to say, if you want to be my people, he said, my people, not because you're the strongest, not because you're the most wealthy, not because you're the greatest amount of people, but I want you to be my people, even though you're a little group. And then later on it says you're a stiff-necked people, but I want you to be my people. So it was specific to those that wanted to come in and walk in relationship. And then of course there's some that backslide. So yeah, it is specific, but I think we need to remember that these specifics that happened at Mount Sinai were already there over 2,500 years before. This is the first time that now everything's getting written down. But that covenant was always there right from the beginning. Did you?
Well, yeah, he did tell Abraham
Mhm.
that you will, your seed will inherit the land. He had already told them that this is what he's going to do. Sinai is just the fulfillment of that promise that he gave to Abraham. Tim, you're looking at me. What are you thinking?
I was that's pretty good. I was thinking of that. Well, now you lost my thoughts. That Abraham was obeying the covenant of Yahuwah. It was credited to him as righteousness. Moshe was teaching that exact same covenant before Mount Sinai. He was teaching it to the people, and he was judging the people by that. The scripture tells us that.
Mhm.
The Mount Sinai was a vocal realization of it, a vocal statement, restating in audible words of that covenant. But that covenant existed right from Adam, right from the very beginning.
You mean the specific instructions
Yes.
or the promise?
Oh, there's a good question. I believe that the instructions for sure,
Mhm.
right from the very beginning, for absolute certain. And I can't believe that the promise wasn't there. I can't prove it from words in scripture yet. But if that covenant was there, that promise had to accompany it. It's integral. It can't be separated. It's so highly specific.
Well, the promise was given to Abraham, and there's a timeline there of 400 years that said that his seed would be delivered in 400 years. And that was that covenant in Genesis 15 was really an interesting covenant. Basically, that Yahuwah was promising that he was going to deliver Abraham's seed in those 400 years, and that did come to pass exactly 400 years later at Passover with Egypt, right? But the other thing too is that there's a lot of people that feel that this covenant was first given at Mount Sinai, that it wasn't heard of before. They feel it was given at Mount Sinai and that it only has a length to Yahushua's crucifixion, and then it's gone. That covenant is fulfilled. That's what we hear up here, is that that covenant was given at Mount Sinai, and then it was fulfilled at the crucifixion. So there's no more covenant. It's gone. Not realizing that the covenant was always there, but at Mount Sinai, it was audibly spoken by Yahuwah, and Moses took the dictation and wrote it down in books.
That's why I'm asking these questions, and I'm trying, to
Mm.
because if we're saying that basically a covenant is the framework that keeps, the whole edifice, the whole building, and the building is the promise, and that existed forever.
Mhm.
But then the specifics of the laws, the instructions, this could vary depending on the time, the period, the people, the situation, but that's not what we mean by covenant. When we say covenant, we don't mean the specific instructions A, B, C, D. This is, and I'm asking because I know this is the argument out there. I know this is the argument. These laws, we cannot fulfill these laws. So, and because the laws, these specific instructions cannot be fulfilled, and we no longer do them, that means that the covenant, because the instructions is the covenant is not valid anymore. But if the covenant is something above that, maybe it encompasses the instructions, but something above and beyond the specific instructions, then the specifics may vary, but above and beyond, it doesn't vary. It's the same. That's the everlasting part. I may be wrong. I'm not saying that this is correct. I'm telling you why I'm asking for clarification.
If we look at the first word of scripture in the Hebrew, bereshit, there's a way of understanding through the Hebrew letters and the Hebrew words within that first word that the covenant, the order of righteousness, tzedakah, was established right there in the very first word of Genesis 1:1. And then when you understand that Yahushua says, I am the beginning and the end, I'm the Aleph and the Tav, we understand that what is at the beginning is at the end, or will be at the end. There is no change in between. So in a way, you could say that was a generalized covenant. It outlined the whole picture. Lots of specifics in the middle, but it's at that point, it was a general order of righteousness that was established in a covering on this earth. And the covering is the word is bereshit. When you look at the word sheet, SHYT, in the Hebrew, it's a covering. It's a garment, to be very, very specific. It's a garment designed for this earth. And that garment was an aura of righteousness covenanted by Yahuwah's own character. This is who I am. And I create this earth, and I establish what's the word am I looking for? The context of righteousness for this earth from the beginning to the end. So I see it as a generalized covenant at that point, and with many specified covenants in fine print, I guess.
Mhm.
Circumcision, for example, circumcision was Abraham's way to show that he is in covenant. But circumcision is not required now to show that we are in covenant. But that's why
Mm,
I'm saying that specifics may change.
mhm.
It's not the specific,
What
the
changed?
covenant, the value, the core of the covenant.
What changed with the specifics of circumcision?
Mhm.
What was it that changed?
From the flesh to the heart.
Mhm.
From
Perfect. Perfect.
yeah.
Mhm. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe I can give a little example. In the very beginning, before sin, Adam and Eve kept the Shabbat perfect, right? With their creator. Absolutely perfect. But then after sin, Sabbath was still there, but now there is something added. Now they have to have sacrifices on the Sabbath. And not only that, but double the sacrifices of every other day. We go along all the way, up to the crucifixion, where Yahusha sheds his blood. And now Sabbath hasn't changed to another day of the week, but there is a change in Sabbath keeping because now they no longer have to do sacrifices, right? Even though they did, the corrupt priesthood still did until 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed. And when we get to the new heaven and new earth, our Sabbath keeping will be different because we'll be back to perfection. But the Sabbath was always there. So when you say that the specifics can change, yes, they can. Another one, they were commanded, to pay their workers that day. They were commanded that they needed to pay their workers that day. Today, we might pay every 2 weeks our workers or every month or whatever it is. But the principle, the overlying principle is that a man deserves to have his wages, and a workman is worthy of his wages. So yes, when we read the instructions that are given there in Exodus 20 to 23, we might be saying, oh, well, we don't do this today. How do we do this? Well, we apply the principles. If Yahuwah was speaking the covenant to us today, it would be under the language that we understand in the culture that we're living with, because we're not all shepherds living out on the land. I don't know, does that help a little bit?
Yes. Another argument that I heard exactly what we do with circumcision, and we say that it's not fleshly anymore. Now it's internal. It's spiritual. It's internal. They they can say exactly the same to every single instruction. Every single instruction we can now interpret it as being internal now and spiritual. They can do it. I mean, we can all do it. We can understand we can understand the symbolism of every single instruction and now say, this you're not required anymore feasts. You're not required to follow, the feasts to every specific instruction, because now that's the earthly way to keep the feasts. But Yahusha fulfilled the feast. All feasts were pointing to the salvation, to his salvation. So now the feasts are internal. You don't have to actually keep them. You just need to understand, what they were pointing to, accept it, and worship it, and keep the feast internally.
That
And
goes
every
again.
other instruction, they can do that.
that goes against the instruction in Scripture, and I forget which verse it is, where we're told that Yahusha left an example for us that we must follow. What was Yahusha's example? He observed the feasts physically on the day after, sorry, on the first day of the week after his resurrection at the morning. He physically observed the feast of Yahuwah. He physically observed the wave sheaf by ascending the first time into the kingdom of Zion to present himself in the heavenly tabernacle as the first fruit. He did this physically. And he is our example that we should follow in his footsteps. So if we are
That's
not,
very nice, Tim. Very nice. And he fulfilled also Pentecost physically.
Mhm.
He sent the Holy Spirit.
yes, yes, this is physical. And
Yes.
people say that we can spiritualize this way, and this is in the mind. Aren't we to be living sacrifices? That's what we're commanded in Scripture. You are to be a living sacrifice. How do we sacrifice spiritually if we don't do anything? When I sacrifice, if you will, and I don't think it's much of a sacrifice because I enjoy Shabbat. When I sacrifice, if you will, on Shabbat, I don't do my work. I don't go out and don't make money. I don't work for a living. What I do is I choose of my own volition to follow Yahusha's footsteps. He observed the Shabbat physically. That's what I do. He observed the feasts physically. That's what I do. That's my sacrifice. I give my time to promote the word of Yahuwah as much as I possibly can. That's my physical living sacrifice. If I just sat back and I thought about it, how many people are going to receive my thoughts if I don't do anything physically? That comes in the word Shema. Listen and act accordingly. If we just listen and don't do anything, what good are we? If you plant a seed in the ground and it thinks about growing, it can stay there for billions of years. Here comes these billions of years. It can lay there for a long time and do nothing, but it's thinking about growing. No. We have to be a seed. We have to sprout. And that's Yahusha. One of the words that references him is a tzemak, a sprout, something that activates, something that grows, something that physically does something. We can't be spiritual. We have to act. Shema,
Well
live.
said.
Shema is listen and act accordingly.
Very
Tim,
well said.
Tim, you had something to say. I just know it.
Do. So as we're talking about Paul, that some of the things, it reminds me of 1 Corinthians 11:1. 1 Corinthians 11:1, Paul says, become imitators of me as I also am of Messiah. So he's an imitator of Messiah. We know in Acts, he observed the festival of unleavened bread while he was on one of his journeys. And then he also wanted to make it back to Jerusalem at that time for Pentecost, for Shavuot. In Philippians 3:17, 3:6, but to what we have already attained, walk by the same rule, be of the same mind. 3:17, Philippians 3:17. Become joint imitators of me, brothers, and look at those who so walk as you have us for a pattern. So we see that with Paul. We see, I was just also thinking of what Tim had said earlier about Abraham in Genesis 26, 26:4, I guess, Genesis 26:4. This is to Isaac, I shall increase your seed like the stars of the heavens, and I shall give all these lands to your seed. And in your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice, he guarded my charge, my commands, my laws, and my Torot. So when you look up those words, it's the mitzvot, the hookah, which is a feminine noun, it's what the bride does. It's what the bride does. So Abraham was doing what the bride should be required to do. The bridegroom does what he is required to do, and then the bride is to do what she should do. Anyway, and it says Abraham obeyed my laws and my Torah, or my instructions, Torah, wrote. And that's before Mount Sinai. And then in Exodus 18, Moses is bringing the children out of Egypt. And in Exodus 18, there are people who want to say that that chapter is out of order. Because in that chapter, Moses is saying that the people are coming to him and he needs to instruct them. And he says in Exodus 18:16, when they have a matter, they come to me, and I rightly rule between one and another, and I make known the laws of Elohim and his Torah, or his teachings. It's, if we understand everlasting covenant, then this is not out of order. So he knew what it was. He's instructing all the people in it. And that word, well, you can look up what the word for laws of Elohim, it's the hookah, I think. I'd have to look it up here quick. And I'm going to do that so that I make sure. But he's also giving them the Torah, the instructions, Torah, the teachings. It's just that, like Charlene was mentioning, that they had not heard the actual voice in the establishment from the heavens, and it was going to be spoken out, and then all the people would realize what Moses had been saying was true, and what Abraham has been doing, and all the fathers. And now it's going to all be sealed.
I'd just like to add to what Kim was mentioning there with Paul in Philippians. His example is so important. He was following what Yehusha did, but in Philippians 4:9, Paul also says, these things which you have learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the Elohim of peace will be with you. So Yehusha had 12 disciples. Paul was the one that replaced the one disciple eventually. There was Mattathias, I think, but Paul was the one that actually went out to the Gentiles. And he's saying, I follow Yehusha, you follow me, my example, because I do what he does, I say what he said. So I think if people would take a closer look at what the words are in the scriptures from Matthew to Revelation, they'll find that Yehusha's representatives were still in covenant. They were still following. It is all over. And like Kim was saying with Exodus, lots of people may say, well, the Sabbath wasn't brought to them until Mount Sinai. It was way back there at the Red Sea. It was there in Exodus 16 with the quail and the manna. The Sabbath was there. They just don't find those stories. So these covenants were there right from the beginning. Does that help a little bit?
In Exodus 8, that he is telling them in verse 16, I rightly rule between one and another, and I make known the laws of Elohim, his. And then in verse 20, and you shall enlighten them concerning the laws and the Torah, and show them the way in which they should walk, and the work which they do. So the pattern, what he does, then his people will mirror that. It's the pattern, so that together they're one, and Yahuwah is glorified. And it's actually, that's actually Exodus 18 is an amazing little nugget.
I'd like to carry that a little bit further off what you were speaking there, Kim, about Yahuwah's people doing what he did, and what we were talking about earlier, that we're to listen and act accordingly. I'm going to read to you from 1 Peter 2, verse 21. For to this you were called, because Mashiach also suffered for us, leaving us an example that we should think about what he did. No, that's not what it says. We are not to spiritualize things away. We have to act accordingly. It says here, leaving us an example that you should follow his footsteps. We have to physically do what he exemplified for us. And I want to thank Kim for bringing up those verses. That just, I thank you, Kim. It's great.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the covenant that was established on Mount Sinai, what was its purpose? What was Yahuwah telling his people? Okay, we understand that I want you to be my people, what you said, Charlene, already. I want you to be my people.
Mhm.
And if you are my people, there are some blessings there listed. If you obey my words, this is, yeah, these are the blessings. And reading the blessings, we read blessings, general blessings, but also, I'm sorry, blessings that we can understand generally, but also blessings that we cannot understand generally. For example, I will send my angel, and he will lead you. I will conquer your. I will set away from from in front of you all your enemies, and I will fight for you. This is the conquest, and this is a specific blessing, which we cannot generalize, or can we?
I think those blessings are still there today. When I look around at those that I have known all my life, my family and those that want to walk in covenant, I see how Yahuwah blesses them. He blesses them with long life. Definitely health is there. There is financial blessings, although they're not being obedient just for the financial blessings, but those blessings are there. There's blessings of how they witness. They're just there. Maybe they don't even realize it, but he does. And when we walk in deliberate disobedience, I'm going to say deliberate, when you know you're doing something wrong and you do it anyway, there will be curses. It might not happen the next day, but those curses will be at the door eventually. And that curse might not come upon because Yahuwah has to back up and the enemy is allowed to come in and rearrange things and bring those curses on. And what I have found is that many times those curses don't show up for 6 or 7 years. And then people wonder, well, what happened? I see that. I see that happening in scripture. You'll see that with those Bible stories. I've seen it in my own life, in the lives of others. So we don't come into covenant just for the blessings, but when we walk in covenant, the blessings are there. That's just the way our Elohim is.
Yes, but can we say that all these blessings today are because we're following Yahusha's new covenant and not the covenant on Mount Sinai?
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Oh, if you want differences, I'm very sure that I can make a list of 100 pages from what all the things I've heard.
Yeah, what you've heard,
different.
but what's the real
The
difference?
the commandments, the specific commandments, the new covenant is only the specific commandments that Yahusha spoke and are written in the New Testament.
Oh, so he
Period.
does change then.
It changed. Give me some time. Give me some. I'll do it. Give me some time. I'll find a counter argument. Wait. Changes.
From what I understand, the only thing that
No,
changed.
he doesn't changes. He doesn't changes. Okay, he doesn't change. He fulfilled. So now it's a new era. That was for the old era. This is for the new era. And the new era has a new covenant, a new promise, and new instructions. or
What was
some
so,
renewed and some abolished.
so what was fulfilled?
Who's interviewing you? Who here?
Let's take
I've heard so
Passover.
much. I've heard so much, and
Let's-
I know I can get into these shoes. I know I can do it. Play
Let's
the devil's advocate here. What did you
L-
say, Tim?
let's take Passover. Everybody says Passover's been fulfilled, done, finished.
Yes.
Okay, that's the first feast. It's done. Yahushua fulfilled that. We don't need to think about that anymore. What about when he said that it's not fulfilled until I drink of that in the kingdom of Yahuwah? He will drink the wine in the kingdom of Yahuwah, and that fruit of the vine will be accomplished. That will be the final fulfillment of Passover in the kingdom of Yahuwah. We're not in that kingdom today, so that has not been fulfilled.
Unless you're a full preterist, then you believe that you are in the kingdom.
Well, if you're a full preterist, you're probably not walking in covenant.
If this is the
In-
kingdom, I want no part of it.
in the everlasting covenant. And Tim's got a good point, because in Revelation 14, those first 5 verses are really interesting. They're talking about the 144,000, and they're called first fruits. So if all of these feasts and festivals have been fulfilled, it is impossible to understand some of the language in the New Testament, because there's feast and festival language everywhere. It's
Yes, maybe the feast is not a good example because I can't argue anyway. I believe it so much that it's very difficult for me to find counterarguments. You find the Feast of Tabernacles in the end, you see it everywhere. But what about the specific laws? For example, for all the specific instructions in Exodus 20, and 21. All these laws, there is an instruction to build an altar from earth or stone. That's in
Who's
the everlasting covenant.
whose altar? That's
His
our
altar.
yes, that is for us to apply in our life. What is that altar? That altar in our life is our statement of value on how our life is going to be structured as a living sacrifice. And those stones on that altar are not to be changed from what he established. Do not cut these stones. Do not make a brick, a man-made brick.
Yes,
Do not
yes.
change my statutes and my laws on how to formulate your altar or your statement of faith, or your statement of being. Don't change those stones. I have given you proper instructions. Do not make a brick out of them. Leave them as I have instructed you. This is your altar, your living sacrifice altar. Those stones that I have given you are rounded stones, if you will, on how I made them. You make them into a brick, it's no longer my covenant. You are not within covenant with me. You are in covenant with someone else. Not of this earth. Well, yeah, of this earth in a way. That's where the altar in the book of the covenant comes from. It's how we apply it today as our living sacrifice. Same as when they come to Mount Sinai and they were told there, do not touch this mountain. Really? What's wrong
Oh
with
yes.
touching? What's
Oh
wrong
yeah,
with
yeah, yeah. Don't say it now, Tim, because I have a whole bunch of questions about this specific point you're about to make. Let's stay with the altar. So
Okay.
you're saying that the instruction was to build an altar from earth or stone, but now we are the altar made from earth or stone
Yes.
somehow.
Our altar is our life, and how we Shema, how we act it out, how we walk it out. Our altar is
And
whether we follow the word of Yahuwah as an example or not. That's our altar.
and the burnt offerings, because there are burnt offerings and peace offerings mentioned there.
The burnt offerings, we are a burnt offering. when we follow Yahusha, we go through a portion of the refiner's fire right now, because living out his life is not easy. We will become burned by people accusing us of wrongdoing, making fun of us, mocking us, things like that. That is part of our refiner's fire. When we go through, when we observe the Shabbat, people laugh at us and make fun of us. When we observe the feasts, people think we're absolutely heretics and absolutely foolish. That's part of the refiner's fire, the burnt sacrifice. You are putting yourself in a position to be burnt psychologically by other people. That's our sacrifice. That's our altar.
That's great, actually. I
Can I-
like it very much.
Can I just
But
add?
yes,
Okay,
just
good.
give me just 5 seconds, Charlene. Will you find me some verses that say that the burnt offering now is you? What you said? Is there a specific verse
Well,
that comes to mind?
I can give you this one, Romans 12:1. It's from Paul again. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Yahuwah, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to Yah, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Yahuwah. So we present ourselves as these sacrifices, as a living stone, like it says in Peter, that we're living stones. We're living testimonies of what he has instructed us to do and what he has done and how he has overcome. We're living testimonies that his power is in us to do his will. Is it called a burnt sacrifice or a peace offering? It doesn't really matter. As far as I understand, the burnt offering and the peace offering, and I'm not an expert in this area, was put on the altar every morning. It's supposed to be at Boker and every evening at Erev, as a way to have permission to come into the holy presence of the Elohim. It wasn't just there for sins, known or unknown. Okay, it was, this is how you come to worship me. When you come, you present this sacrifice so that you can come into my holy presence. And that's another big study that, I've just dabbled in a little tiny bit. Kim, did you have something? You kind of look like.
Yes, the whole burnt offering. We are that. We wholly give ourselves to him in the morning and in the evening. All of us. And the peace offering is, I always understood the peace offering is something you bring, but you share that. That's a shared meal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back to that verse again, verse 2 that you brought up, Charlene. That's absolutely fabulous there. The renewing of your, no, back up, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Can I say that you have to burn the old traditions and get rid of them? That's part of the refiner's fire doing work in our life. That's our sacrifice. We're willing to lay down our thoughts our traditions that we have been instilled with, and we let that be burned, be removed from our mind. Transform and renew your mind so that you prove is what is good and well pleasing. It's a transformation process. It's not easy.
Yep. Amazing. Okay. Very good. Yes. On your presentation, you're mentioning the fact that according to prophetic instruction, the temporary covenant was obsolete upon the death of Messiah. Where can I find that? Well, can you point me a few prophecies, or where in the Old Testament can I find that specifically, that upon the Messiah's death, some parts of the covenant would be obsolete?
Oh, in the Old Testament, did you say, or the New?
Yeah, the old.
In the Old.
That's what I'm understanding. According to prophetic instruction, the temporary covenant was obsolete upon the death of Messiah. I mean, it has to be in the Old Testament.
Genesis 49:10.
The well, first of all, the the Aaronic priesthood was temporary to start with. So there's nothing that can end it unless Yahusha comes and he's the one that picks up the priesthood of the Melchizedek. But
Yes,
Tim,
but by that sentence, I understand. Maybe I understood wrongly. I understood that in the prophets, somewhere in the prophets, they mentioned that that part of the covenant would end, would stop with Yahusha's coming.
That's
Or
Daniel.
I understood wrongly. What do you mean by that sentence?
Are you referring to Daniel 7?
I don't know. I'm asking you. What are you referring to when you're saying that sentence?
Daniel
When you say that.
Daniel 9:27.
Yeah. Let me get it here. And he shall confirm a covenant with many for
Mhm.
1 week. And in the middle of the week, he shall put an end to the slaughtering and meal offering. And on the wings of abominations he shall lay waste, even until the complete end. And that which is decreed is poured out on the one who lays waste. So when is it that the slaughtering and the meal offering was to be terminated?
That's just for the sacrifices, though, not for the rest of the law. Because I know, and you know, Tim, also people say, um, we can't sacrifice because the temple was destroyed, but everything else, every single thing from the Mosaic law, we are meant to keep. And if we have a temple again, we will keep sacrificing. That's wrong. But what you said, it refers only to the sacrifices. What about the rest of the instructions? That they're now obsolete.
Which rest of the instructions are you identifying?
The instructions that we're giving after the blood ratification of the covenant on Mount Sinai.
So what part of those instructions that deal with the tabernacle are not part of the book of the covenant that are finished?
All these instructions are not we cannot observe them anymore. These are instructions about the priesthood, the tabernacle, as you said. These are obsolete. That's what we're saying here.
The ones to do with the sacrificial system, where all the animals on all the bloodletting is done, they're sacrificed. That portion is gone. Yes.
Okay,
The-
I understand what you're saying. You're saying that Daniel refers, when he says the sacrifices he will put an end to sacrifice, he's referring to the whole system. The temple, the priesthood, everything, everything gone with upon Yahusha's death.
Well, it was pretty obvious when he died that that great big veil between the holy place and the most holy place, which was a huge veil, was very, very thick, and it was ripped from top to bottom. And that was a very strong indication that the temple was no longer needed. And the priest didn't go into that most holy place but once a year, but now it's completely open. So Yahusha has fulfilled all of those requirements of that priesthood and the sanctuary. In Hebrews 10:20, it says that his flesh is that veil, that his flesh, that veil was ripped, just like his flesh was ripped. He represents everything. He's big study here. He has fulfilled every sacrifice. He's fulfilled every part of that priesthood. He's fulfilled every piece of that sanctuary, right down to the color of the silver and the gold or whatever, the brass. It all points to him. All that fulfillment is in him. But that has nothing to do with the covenant instructions. Those covenant instructions were not touched. Not one.
Okay, there are more instructions after the blood ratification that are not related to the temple or to the sacrificial system. Like, for example, the gigis, how you call them, gigis, that Hebrews Jews are wearing, the
Oh,
garments.
The tzitzis,
Yes,
that was
these are not related, but are they obsolete now? Are we not supposed to wear those?
well, the thing is that those laws were given after the covenant. That was because they were being disobedient. They're tzitzis, and they were to wear ribbons of blue on the bottom of their garments.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So if you're giving me Daniel, this verse from Daniel to tell me that that part of the covenant is now obsolete, and prophets told us that it will be obsolete, I'm saying that Daniel refers only to the sacrificial system. Does he also refer to the rest of the instructions that they're not part of the sacrificial system, like the blue ribbons and everything else? Is Daniel referring to these laws also, that they will be obsolete?
I don't know that Daniel that I know of doesn't say it specifically like that. But when we understand that the blood ratified covenant instructions only go to Exodus 24:11, whatever is added after that is not everlasting covenant. Now, as far as tzitzis are concerned, we have heard people say, well, Yahusha wore them, so we need to wear them too. But he's still living under that Aaronic priesthood until he dies. It is true that I'm just absolutely positive that he wore those tzitzis. That was a sign to people of who they were, which Elohim that they belonged to. For us today, it was an added law. It's no longer necessary unless you can't remember. If you can't remember that you want to be obedient and stay in covenant, maybe you should wear them, But I see no indication after his death that there's a need to wear tzitzis, the ribbons of blue, the boxes, on the wristband, on the forehead. They had many different ways where Yahuwah says, you're going to have to do this because you just don't remember. And it still didn't help because there was a lot of apostasy in the Old Testament, a lot.
What I'm trying to get out of this, Charlene and Tim and Kim, is a solid verse that we can use to people who are being very legalistic. Because if to these people you don't say, here is a passage, here is what this prophet meant, here is what Genesis meant, that these will no longer, if it's not blood ratified, then it's not permanent. Only if it's blood ratified, it's permanent. Where can I find that in the Old Testament and show them here? This is why we're saying this. This is why we're saying that whatever was given after the covenant was blood ratified is no longer valid. This is why we're telling us it's not our own understanding. We believe that if it's after the blood ratification, it's not valid anymore. Where is the passage? Where is the backup? That's what I'm asking for. Because it makes sense. It makes sense to me, but what makes sense to me doesn't make sense to somebody else. You understand? Different people have different senses.
There's a reason why Scripture says we are to study to prove ourselves worthy. It doesn't say read a text so that you can be worthy. It says study. This stuff doesn't come from just reading a text or two. It comes from study and study all through Scripture in different aspects, different examples. It's not something you can just pick up one text and say, here it is. It's not there.
But you understand, Tim. So
Yeah.
many people read and study, and they preach and they teach so many different understandings. They all study. They all study. I believe them. I believe them when they're telling me that we're studying. I know they're studying, and they understand. They land on on the opposite side of the river. Legalistic. All the laws. It's the laws of God. It's the laws of Yahuwah. It's not the laws of Moses. Nothing is obsolete. We need to keep everything. And they study and they study and they study. So how are we approaching these people? Because they're studying. I can't tell them, you don't study. Study and you'll see it. I mean, if you read the Torah, it's evident, it's obvious. Because the response is, I read the Torah every day, and it's not obvious. What's obvious is the opposite of what you're saying.
Kim, I
Is
know,
is it a stalemate?
Kim, you had something to say, and I have something to add too.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, many of the prophets speak of the destruction of the temple and of Jerusalem. So it did not exist. There was no temple before Mount Sinai. Okay, then there was the tabernacle, which was to teach the people how to walk in the circuits and the cycles, And then they wanted to build remember, David wanted to have a house, a temple, not a temple. He wanted a house for Yahuwah, but Yahuwah said, the whole earth is mine. You can't contain me in that. But it was Solomon who built the temple. My question is, did Yah just allow that? Because the whole earth is his and everything in it, and he meant to indwell his people. But he allowed it, and then they profaned his ways in the temple. They carved images in there. They brought idols of Baal and Ashtoreth in there, and the whole system became corrupt. And then the prophets begin to speak of the wrath of Yah coming against that place. And Jerusalem, even in Ezekiel, Jerusalem rebelled against my right rulings, and I'm going to reject you, and I'm going to execute judgments, and all the nations are going to see this. And that did happen various times. The last time it happened was in 70 AD. And that whole system is done. Even Yahusha prophesied that. All he was doing was quoting what the prophets had said ahead of time. And what is my thought on this? Just so we'd have to pull. That's how I see it. As far as I could go through, someone could go through the prophets and find all the different places where he's saying he's going to destroy that temple. And with the temple is the system. You can't have the temple is the priesthood and all the sacrifices and everything. Now, the question is there going to be a new temple built? Do the prophets speak about a new temple going to be built? A lot of people like to go to Ezekiel, at the very end of Ezekiel, but there's also the question of, are those scrolls of Ezekiel in the proper order? Is that book out of order? That's something that someone can study. To me, it appears they're out of order, and that it's not speaking of a new temple that's going to be rebuilt. I don't see that.
But Kim, with the destruction of the temple, I don't find it as a very good argument for what we're discussing here, because I know that there are plenty of people who believe that the destruction of the temple was specific for the Jews. It was very specific. They disobeyed, they profaned, they were judged. That doesn't apply to us. Okay, we don't have a temple, but we weren't judged. So we need to keep following it. It wasn't the system that was judged. It was the disobedient Jews. So everything goes, everything remains for the rest of us who didn't disobey, who don't want to disobey. I know the argument. I've heard it.
Okay, yeah.
I know.
I have two things to say. As far as the temple is concerned, back there in Deuteronomy 16, Moses is giving a review before he dies of all of the feasts and festivals. And in that scripture about Passover, it's really interesting because it's a prophecy. And he is telling them, let me just read it. He is telling the people, verse 5, he's saying, you may not sacrifice the Passover within any of your gates, which Yahuwah your Elohim gives to you, but at the place where Yahuwah your Elohim chooses to make his name abide,
Yep.
there you shall sacrifice the Passover. So Moses is telling them that when they come into the land, they're not going to be sacrificing the Passover at their homes like they did in Egypt, but that they're going to have to come up to the place where Yahuwah says you're going to come to sacrifice those lambs. Well, that place was Jerusalem, and they had to do it at the temple. I was just reading about this last night. Not at their home, because Josephus says that sometimes there was 3 million Jews that were in Jerusalem. So just imagine how far away they might have been camped from the temple. They were not allowed to sacrifice at their dwelling place wherever they came in, but they had to go to the temple. Okay, so this is a prophecy that if you're going to, when you sacrifice, you have to go to Jerusalem, you have to go to the temple. Today, if we're supposed to be doing sacrifices, everybody in the world, because we have to come back to the original, how is it even possible? It's not even possible, especially for those of us that don't live near the land, right? So that was one thing that I wanted to say, is that we have to look at what these prophecies are, for how long the length of time was, and then it would be finished. Because Yahusha is the greatest sacrifice that could ever be given. He's the one that ended all the sacrifices. To me, that's pretty easy to understand. If people want to go ahead and sacrifice instead, to me, it means that they haven't accepted Yahusha as the Messiah that has fulfilled all of those sacrifices, all of that priesthood, and everything about the sanctuary. So that's one thing that I wanted to say. The other point that I wanted to make about, let's go back to the tzitzis and all those kinds of things. We need to look at what the Bible says and what it does not say. And that's a hard thing to do, to read between the lines. What is it not saying? When we read from Genesis 1 all the way to Exodus 24:11, which contains, I like to call it covenant Torah pages. If you can find tassels, wearing tassels in there, then you better wear them. If you can find ribbons of blue, then you wear them. But there's nothing. It's completely silent. So the everlasting covenant has no instructions in there about you need to wear this, do this, or whatever. These ribbons of blue, boxes of black, on your wrists, whatever it might be. Let's go up to the New Testament. We have been told many times that if Yahusha believes and kept that the day started at dawn and not at sunset, surely he would have corrected the leaders of the temple, the leaders in Jerusalem. Surely he would have told them that your sunset is wrong, that he would have corrected them. And that stumped us for a long time, because we couldn't find the red words in the New Testament that said, where Yahusha said, you know what, you've got sunsets wrong, you need to start the day at dawn. That's where we eventually found that you have to look at what it doesn't say, but you have to now look at Yahusha's actions. What are his sandals saying? What is he doing? What is the witness that is being recorded by the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John Gospels that tells us how he lived out the instructions of the everlasting covenant Torah in his life? And that takes a little bit of work to look and see because he doesn't have to say anything. Why? Because he already spoke it. He's already said it in the Torah. And there's lots of testimonies in the whole Old Testament that back that up. So he didn't need to say it again. He's saying, I'm coming here now as a witness, as an example. This is the way it is. So that takes a little bit of time to look and to read those words, and then to say, now what is it not saying? what is missing. And in the everlasting Torah, the tzitzis, the ribbons of blue, it's missing. The instructions are not there. I don't know if that helps at all.
It's, I think the issue is one step before what we're discussing now, Charlene. It's why we're saying that if it's not blood ratified, then it's not everlasting.
Mhm.
Why we're saying that? I think that's the foundation of what we're saying here.
Oh, because that's the four components that make up an everlasting covenant. That's what we were showing, that if there's a proposal by Yahuwah, these are going to be my instructions. This is what they are. They're written down in the book and on the tables of stone. And if you accept it and there's blood ratification and now we have a meal, it's those four components. If those four components are there and you can't find tzitzis in those instructions, then they're not everlasting. It's easy.
With Abraham, I know because we mentioned it. There was blood ratification when Yahuwah's fire passed in between
Mhm.
the divided animals. Was there a meal after that? Or are we inferring that there was a meal after that?
That meal came 400 years later at the Passover in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. That was the confirming meal.
Mhm.
But the Passover?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
there's-
Abraham didn't have a meal that night.
Not that night, but the agreement stated there was for 400 years later.
Mhm.
And that is exactly what happened 400 years later, the Passover meal in Mitzrayim, when his family came out.
Yeah, there's different levels and we haven't gone into that, but the same thing with Yahusha. His blood ratification was at that tree on that day, but the covenant confirming meal is going to be when we eat it with him in the kingdom. It's called the wedding supper.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for that covenant to have its final covenant confirming meal. Because he said to his disciples, I'm not going to eat this or drink this with you until the kingdom.
So we're saying here, correct me if I'm wrong, we're saying here that if there is a meal, then the fulfillment is right now, right there, right here, right now. But if the meal is saved for later, then the fulfillment of that agreement is whenever we have that meal. The timing of the meal shows us when the fulfillment will be of the covenant that we are deciding right now, we're agreeing right now, and we're blood ratifying it.
The meal, go ahead, Tim.
We need to remember there's different levels of fulfillment in prophecy.
Mhm.
There's immediate and a future.
Mhm.
There's different levels. It's not just one level.
Mhm.
What was the immediate in with Abraham?
It wasn't
That
immediate.
he had a son. That he had a son. He had a seed.
But the agreement with Abraham, within that agreement, built into the words, is the 400 years. It was an agreement with a time frame built into that agreement right there.
And with Mount Sinai, isn't there also an end point? You'll reach your the promised land when you enter Canaan. That's when all these things will happen. There is also a time frame there.
That agreement was immediate right
Mhm.
there. You are my people. You have agreed to this 3 times. It's been blood ratified. The blood has been sprayed on you by Moshe. And this agreement is done right here and now, immediately. It's also on another level in future.
Mhm.
It's to come. You will be my people in time to come, and it will be fulfilled in the kingdom of Yahuwah. when Yahusha comes again. That's another fulfillment.
We also say the same thing with Abraham, that there will be another Exodus at the end for the for the rest of the world, for all the earth. Basically, he's gonna call us out of sin and deliver us to his kingdom.
Yeah.
Isn't that another Exodus event, sort of?
Sort of, yeah.
And that's kind of the neat part about the scriptures is the patterns. The patterns are there, they repeat. Sometimes they enlarge a little bit with more information, but those patterns are always there. That's why when we look at the patterns in the scriptures, well, that's what Isaiah says, you can know the end from the beginning. But to study all those patterns out, that takes time, right? That's because they can be on many different levels, many different dimensions. And they will, some patterns, okay, you have, let's just use the everlasting covenant. We found all of it there in a very small nugget there in Exodus. But from Genesis 15 down to Exodus 12, that was the same pattern, but that was 400 years. So that's why whoever is studying this covenant and this priesthood that has put a lot of work into it, really they would have the greater understanding and be able to explain it a little better. And sometimes too, it's really not sometimes, all the time, it's really important to get this terminology right, because if the terminology isn't correct, you can give an improper understanding to people without realizing that you have done that. And so, we're in that process right now of trying to find that very correct terminology so that there would be no misunderstanding of this beautiful message. Really, this Melchizedek priesthood message and this everlasting covenant is the cornerstone of all the scriptures, far and above anything else. Yeah.
It's the Aaronic priesthood with Levitical priests and the temple system that was removed. And Yahusha cursed that.
Mhm.
We read about that in Matthew 23, verse 37. He said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers her chickens under her wings, but you would not. Verse 38. See, your house is left to you laid waste. Your house. He's not speaking of a city. He's saying your house, your central organization of faith, is left to you waste. That's a curse. Now, if that curse isn't complete, if there's a pattern broken in his curse, we're going to read about this when he cursed that fig tree, Luke 11 verse 20. When he cursed it, and it says, and in the morning, passing by, they saw the fig tree dried up from the roots. Then Kipha, remembering, said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree which you cursed has withered. That curse is done, it's complete. That was pronounced on the tabernacle system in Jerusalem. It's left to you waste. It's done, it's dead. It has no more efficiency for you. It's finished, it's done. Those are his words.
Mhm.
That's what was removed. That's what was finished.
But we also have to remember at this time, it's been about 200 years already that this priesthood became corrupt. It was a corrupt priesthood, which was even worse. It's not that the Aaronic priesthood had to end, but this corrupt priesthood also had to come to an end, because these were not priests from the sons of Aaron. They purchased their position, or they were given their position from Rome. So the whole priesthood is now extremely corrupt. It was not even what it was set up to be. John the Baptist was the last correct, legitimate priest of Aaron. He was the last one. But he was not in the temple. He did not go in there because it was such a corrupt system. So so some of the things that you're talking about, we would be showing in another part to show how that all comes together in a simple format. Simple.
Okay. Didn't Yahuwah ask Moses to come up the mountain with Aaron
Mhm.
before the people rejected to hear his voice? I mean that instruction doesn't come before the Israel's rejection.
Mhm. Yeah, that was the plan.
What's the purpose of that? Because my understanding was that the Aaronic priesthood was instituted because the people refused to have an immediate, connection and communication with Yahuwah. Hence, they needed a mediator now.
Mhm.
But then, if I'm correct here, then why Moses is supposed to go with Aaron on the mountain before Israel's
Well,
rejection?
Well, Yahuwah said that the next time I call you up, you're coming with Aaron. But guess what? The next time Moses went up was when the people told him to go up.
So you're saying something like a prophecy. I know that they're going to reject me, so next time come up with Aaron. That's how you read
Well,
that passage.
Basically, 19. Uh, 1924, Yahuwah said to him, because Moses was saying, he was at the top of the mountain and he's saying, you've warned the people not to touch the mountain and they're not going to. We already know that. So that was verse 23. And then Yahuwah said to him, okay, away, get down, and then come up, you and Aaron with you. So he's basically saying, when I ask you to come up the next time, it's going to be you with Aaron and of course the sons, and there was 75 elders. But Moses didn't go up the mountain the next time on Yahuwah's instructions. He went up because the people begged him to go. They didn't want to listen anymore. They were frightened. They thought for sure they were going to die. And Moses said, Yah's coming to test you. And they just said, no, we don't want to, we want you to go up. You go up. So he went up. But he didn't go up on Yahuwah's instructions. He went up because the people begged him to go up.
So basically, this is the timeline. He comes down the mountain at dawn. He gives the 10 Commandments, the Decalogue, correct?
Yeah.
Then he instructs Moses to come up with Aaron. The next time you come up, bring Aaron and the rest of them. Then the people reject his voice because reject his voice. They're very afraid. They don't want to have any part. And they're telling Moses, you be the mediator. We don't want to have any part of this. So that's the rejection. And then Moses does go back up the mountain and receives the instructions.
No, we've got that a little bit mixed up. This is the way it works.
Okay.
Yahuwah spoke what we call the 10 commands, the 10 words. And then right after that, that's verse 17 is thou shalt not covet. That's the 10th one. And right after that, verse 18, it says, now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. When the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. They were scared.
Okay.
Scared to death. And I think we would have been too. Then they said to Moses, you speak with us and we will hear, but not let Elohim speak with us lest we die. And Moses said to the people, do not fear, for Yah has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you so that you do not sin. But the people stood afar off. That means they backed up. They said they rejected.
Okay. And then?
Suggestion. So Moses drew near the thick cloud, the thick darkness where Yah was. That's when Moses went up. Then he receives the rest of the covenant. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, it's spoken about to him about the law of the altar. This is how I want you to worship me. That very first commandment was worship me and only me. So he's saying, this is how I want you to do it. And then in chapters 21, 22, and 23 are the instructions on how to live together as a nation of people, not just individual patriarchal families. Now you're a nation of people. So now these are the instructions of how you're going to live together and solve.
Wait, he asks for Aaron before he gives them the remaining of the covenantal instructions. It's on chapter 19 that he asks for
Yes,
Aaron.
Yahuwah is basically saying that the next time I have you come up here on this mountain, I want you to come with Aaron. But Yahuwah doesn't call Moses up. It's between verses 18 to 21, the people tell Moses to go up. You see the difference?
No, I'm confused.
Well,
We
go
need
ahead.
to remember that Aharon was a designated spokesperson for Moshe because Moshe was hesitant to speak. And Aharon was
to
the
the people.
designated, yeah, Aharon was a designated spokesperson by Yahuwah for Moshe. He had a very important position.
Mhm.
You know what? Because maybe, it's a silly question. I have my timelines messed up. I haven't written them down, and in my head, I'm all confused now. Let's move on from the timeline. If I have something extra, we can have. I can ask you next time I see you about the timeline. But so let's put that on the side for the moment, the timeline. And can we address, Tim, what you were about to tell me about why the people were not, people and beasts, they were not allowed to touch the mountain, even from the beginning, before they ever had any idea of whether they would be scared or not. Yahuwah already had set his limit, a limit with the people, apart from Moses.
They
Why
were
did he do
told
that
they were
from
told
the
not to
beginning?
they were told not to touch his mountain. And to us, if we don't search out, it seems like a pretty strange order. Put a barrier around a mountain, don't touch my rocks. That
It's
seems
strange if we're telling people that originally Yahuwah, all Yahuwah wanted was a direct connection with his people. So if we're saying that, then why set the limit? You cannot approach.
exactly. He wanted a direct relationship with the people. Don't touch my rocks, if you will. Don't touch my rocks. What are his rocks? And what are his mountain? What I should say, what
What is
is
his
his mountain?
mountain?
Yeah, what is it? His mountain is the way. It's the feasts and festivals. It's the appointments. It's the portals to his kingdom, the portals that he provided for man, so that if we're there at those portals on his appointed times, he will deliver to us the blessings that he has already promised us if we're there on his appointed time. Do not touch my mountain. Don't, here we go again. Do not carve the round rocks of the altar into square bricks. Do not change my dates and my appointments of my mountain, my Moedim. The Moedim are described as a mountain because they are in an elevated position that is not easy to attain. It is something that you have to strive to achieve. You have to count your days to be there at his appointments. Do not touch my stones. I have said, Abib 14, just for an example, Abib 14 is my first date, my first appointment. If you touch my stones and you change my schedule onto a, let's go for this way, let's change it onto a lunar based calendar. You have just touched the rock to my mountain. You have just changed my schedule to your schedule. You're on a different schedule, and you are now redesigning my mountain, my calendar, my schedule, my commitment to you. You are changing my rocks. Do not change my rocks, is what he's telling his people. Yes, it seems very strange. Don't touch my mountain. But when you really study it, it's do not change the design of my plan of salvation for you. Otherwise, I'm going to come down and destroy you. Think about this very carefully.
Mhm.
If he's going to destroy people for touching a rock on his mountain physically, that makes no sense.
What about the
If
beasts? Why are the beasts mentioned there? The beasts have nothing to do with changing his word, or not?
there's a good question, a really good question. How would the beasts change his mountain? I don't know that.
I'm going to try to give an answer to that, but Tim, I think a good scripture for this would be Isaiah 14, 12, especially verse 13. Maybe you can get that for Maria. But what were the beasts in those days? What was the beast? Just a beast? Or was it their transportation? Were some of those beasts their transportation? And yes, those beasts were oxen that would plow their fields, their tractor. Some of their beasts were their car, their bus, their family bus. So we need to think about today. What would those beasts be for us today? You know, how do we use these kinds of things that transgress? I'm just thinking out of the box. I'm just asking questions, Tim.
I'll take that onto a whole different area.
Yeah, elaborate. Don't leave us here. A
The
bit more.
beasts.
One push. I need to follow you. Don't stop there. I'm afraid.
The beasts. What was
Yeah.
under the laver?
Oh,
What was what?
What was under the
Ah,
laver?
oxen, bulls. Well, what
Oh,
the?
oxen.
Yeah.
Boker. That's the word. Boker. Light. The division of light. That division, there was 12 oxen, Boker, under the laver, 12 months. Yeah, that's the months of the blood ratified covenant calendar. It represented starting at dawn, dawn to dawn, 12 months, which relates directly to the tree of life in Revelation with the 12 months for the nations. Do not change my beasts. Or I mean, I don't let the beasts touch my mountain. What about if those those oxen under the laver? What if there was 13 of them? What if they were onto a lunar calendar and those beasts under the laver were changed? They did not represent dawn to dawn on the calendar of Yahusha, how his sandals walked out the Torah. What if you changed that and you observed by the lunar based calendar? Then those oxen that represented his schedule, his Moedim, those oxen would be changed. They would touch his mountain, they would change his schedule. It's a whole nother area, a different area of thinking of don't let the beasts touch his mountain. Those beasts, if they're changed to misrepresent his calendar, his appointments, those that word beasts take on a whole different meaning.
Tim, you make the connection between his holy mountain and with his calendar exclusively. He means
Ab-
his calendar.
Absolutely. Let me read to you Isaiah
Not any
14.
not any other part of his way. It's not generally his ways, but it's specific for his calendar.
Let
The
me read
mountain.
to you from this verse, Isaiah 14. I'm going to start in verse 12 for context. How you have fallen from the Shemayim, O Hallel, son of the morning. That's the adversary directly. You have been cut down to the ground, you who laid low the Gentiles. Verse 13. For you have said in your heart, let me go up to the Shemayim, or the heavens. Let me raise my throne above the stars of El. That's the Matzeroth. Here, the adversary is declaring that he is going to be, hang on to that thought, we're going to read it. Let me sit in the mount of meeting, Har Moedim, mount of meeting, on the where? On the sides of the north. The north, that is the Siphon, that's where Yahuwah rules from. And the adversary declared that he is going to be in the Mount of Moedim in the Tzfon. He is going to be the ruler. He is going to change the way, which is the appointed times of Yahuwah. He claimed that he is going to control that. He is going to take over. He is going to usurp our allegiance to Yahuwah for himself. And he has about 99% effectively done that by taking people off of Yahuwah's appointed time, off of the 12 boker, the oxen under the laver, or the 12 months.
And giving them Santa Claus
yes,
instead.
He has removed that calendar. He has put people on a lunar calendar, or he has put people on a 364-day Dead Sea Scroll affiliate calendar. He has totally changed the appointments, totally. And people accept it. Do not touch my mountain, my appointed times. The portals which I have promised to be with you at that time and bless you. Don't change that. And if you do touch that, if you do change the appointments,
you should be stoned.
I'm going to come down and destroy you. I'm going to break out against them, is what it says at Mount Sinai. Do we risk being broken out upon by Yahuwah?
That particular appointment in Exodus 20 was on Pentecost, a 50-day count. And one of the ways that that mountain has been touched is with the 99-day Omer count. That's one way. Serious.
Kim, do you have anything to add?
Me?
Yes.
No, I just find it interesting. That part where it said, whether man or beast, he shall not live. And then he goes on and says, the people, the people, the people. So I just wondered if he was thinking of, if he's calling some people beasts. They're the people that have come with his people out of Egypt. Are they the mixed group? I don't know. Just my thought. So whether you're my person or you're the mixed multitude, now you're the people and none of you can come mountain and touch it. And
very
even
valid.
It's even saying too, be prepared by the third day. Don't come on the first day. Don't even go up on, don't even touch it. Even when I come down, you're not touching it, let alone don't touch it before I come down. So I don't know. But
and why when he's reiterating this to Moses, Moses says, why are you telling me to, bring the people? You've already told me not to, that the people are not allowed to approach. What's that dialogue all about? The second time.
What I see is that when there's repetition of something like that, it is so important that it's pay attention, make sure.
Okay, all right.
When we see things that are repeated like that, it's always something important. Do not bypass it. Make sure you.
And Moses didn't understand that. That was just an extra reminder. Don't touch the mountain. Because he asks, why are you telling me again? You already told me. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, Moses is telling him, yeah, we got the memo. We got the memo. We get it. There's some humor there too, but Yahuwah does. He makes sure that you understood, so that nobody can say, well, we didn't really quite understand it, you know. He's just making sure.
All right. And the last question that I want to ask about the instructions of the blood ratified part of the covenant. We read there, okay, many things that we cannot apply. We don't apply today. Like as you mentioned with slaves, etc., etc. Okay, I can make them, let's say, the connection with the present day. What a slave would signify today. It's not the same what it signified back then, but okay, let's make the transition of what a slave means. But what about of the violence that is there? The people were meant to be killed, and that's part of the blood ratifying covenant. If you disobey, you kill them. You know, if someone disobeys, if someone is a witch, someone is whatever, you kill him. We're not supposed to kill people today, I'm guessing, even if they're witches and I don't know what else. Horrible people. Because somebody else is going to judge them at the appointed time, I'm guessing.
We're not supposed to murder people. Murder and killing is a different topic, different concepts.
Are you saying that if a witch is living next to me, I can go and kill her?
No, that's murder. If you're commanded, Yahuwah,
Because it's premeditated, but that's the instruction. If there is a witch among you, you take her there and stone her. Premeditative murder. You go there with intent and you kill her.
Well, you need
And
to.
that's an order. What?
There's a
What?
system. There's a system to bring judgment against people too. So there has
But
to.
that's what I mean, Kim. It's part of the blood ratifying covenant is a system that we do not follow today. We cannot follow this system. But if it's eternal, shouldn't we? It's
But could it be this, that this world is not under Yahuwah's system anymore? They have not submitted to a heavenly theocracy. Each country is under their own system of laws, rules, and judgments
yes.
and constitutions.
So how do we say to people that all of the instructions of this blood ratifying covenant are eternal? And then we're telling them, well, they are eternal, but not really.
Because in the end, this is what it says: every knee shall bow, and every tongue will confess that he is Elohim. And at that point, when everyone has confessed that he is the Elohim, that he's in charge, that is when these instructions of stoning those that are completely evil throughout that is when he can allow what his words were spoken is that they need to be done away with, because they have totally given themselves over to the enemy. There's no returning back. They've been marked. They've chosen their master. There's no changing their minds. It's over. And that's where the feasts and festivals are so important, is because that final day of atonement, that is where everybody in the world will have made up their mind, either choose Yahuwah and live forever, or choose your other master, and there will be eternal separation. So it's hard for us to understand. Now, the other thing is that there was a law and a command from Yahuwah that they could do this. Okay, and he did command that the witches be destroyed because he knew that they were going to be trouble for his people. But there's also the instance where a family had a son and he was disobedient. He would not obey. They took him to the priesthood and to the gate, wherever it was, and said, we don't know what to do with him. He will not listen to us. And he was taken outside the camp and stoned. But we don't have instances where that happened every single time. Why? Because of mercy. Because of mercy. So even though That's why we had at the end of that last presentation. Some of the punishments or the curses were not enacted immediately because of mercy. But there will come a day when that mercy will be filled up. Go ahead, Tim.
When that lady that was caught in adultery was brought before Yahusha, according to the very strict words of the law, she was entitled to be stoned on the spot immediately right there. He did not do that. Is he a sinner?
Yes, but that's an argument for the fact that the covenant is not eternal. Yahusha abolished it
Okay.
because it was part of the everlasting covenant. But no, Yahusha said no. We don't stone anymore.
Did he say
We
no?
forgive.
If she had continued
No,
in her,
he forgave her. He forgave her. He gave her mercy. He showed her mercy. Go up, what is he saying? I don't see your sin, but go and sin no more. That's what he says. He doesn't follow the everlasting commandment. No, she needs to be killed.
so
Tim, there is a change there with Yahusha. There is a change there in this.
no, I don't
He's
agree.
introducing something that was not introduced because part of the everlasting covenant was not show mercy, give her a chance. If she doesn't repent, then stone her. If she does it again, then stone her. But that's what Yahusha says. Don't stone her. Forgive. Give her another chance
Yes,
so that she doesn't sin.
that's because the penalty did not have to be executed immediately, even though it gives permission to do that. So I'm just going to use 21. I'll read 23 for the context, but Exodus 21, 23, and 24. But if any lasting harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And if a man strikes the eye of a servant or the eye of his maidservant and destroys it, he shall let him go free for the sake of his eye. Now that's for a servant. But now, in direct comment to that, in Exodus, let me just go to Matthew 5, and this is all red words in this chapter, in verse 33, 38, and 39. This is what Yahusha says, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? We just read it. He said, if someone strikes out your eye, you can go strike out their eye, right? He said, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him. And if anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. So Yahusha is saying, that's what you have been told, but I am telling you, you don't have to execute that punishment. You can have mercy. And that's what he was showing, is that he wants to give mercy, but the day is coming when the execution of the penalty will be dealt out. And that is.
So you're saying that these instructions, are not, we're not supposed to execute them immediately. We're not supposed to execute them because Yahusha is instructing us to have mercy instead of an eye for an eye. But if we did give an eye for an eye, if we did take an eye for an eye, it's lawful because it's part of the everlasting covenant. If we didn't find mercy at that moment, it's okay.
But it's only if you're under a complete theocracy which we are not today. We are not we are living under we're living under this Canadian government. So if we go and pluck out somebody's eye because they hurt our eye, we're in trouble because of our Canadian government
Yes.
laws, our US government laws, the laws in Greece. Our countries are not under
The laws in Greece say that we can take an eye for an eye.
Okay, good. You're closer to
Come here.
than we
Sorry.
We also need to remember, yes, we are entitled to do what it says immediately. You can take out that eye. But we're also told that we will be judged according to how we judge.
Yes.
Do you want that same eye removed because you messed up? Or do you want the mercy because you made a mistake? We need to remember that. We will be
My
judged.
point is that Yahuwah doesn't give mercy in that Sinai everlasting cup. It's not the mercy that he's showing. Yahusha comes and reveals the mercy.
I think he showed mercy when he wanted to take the people out right away. He was ready
Yes,
to
I'm
take them
talking
out.
about the written laws. I'm talking about the written laws, not about the character of Yahuwah. Clearly. Yes.
Okay.
The written laws there don't have the mercy that Yahusha comes and explains to us. He explained it to us, not just for the eye, for an eye, but for everything.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what, Maria, this is where a lot of people have trouble with the Old Testament because of that. But how do we explain the ways of Elohim and his righteousness when we have so much sin in our lives and in our past? The only thing that I can understand is that he was trying to get the point across that if you've got a bad apple in the bunch, in the barrel, that bad apple does no longer ever have a chance to become good. It is going to get worse and worse. And if there is sin in the camp that is drastic, it needs to be handled so that the rest can be, how can I say, kept in covenant, perhaps. He gave that permission. When they went into the land, they were commanded to destroy the pagans, not only the men, but the women and the children, and sometimes the animals too. Everything was so polluted with sin that nothing could be there. The whole land had to be cleansed. And I have people that are horse lovers. They love horses. And they said, well, why did the horses have to be destroyed? Well, the horses were used for war and for things that Yahuwah never had plans on. Yahuwah said, you know what, I'm going to fight for you. But he probably knew if they had horses, they were going to try to do it themselves. I'm not sure. I'm just brainstorming here right now. But his laws were given in such a way to give them the message that they had to keep the camp clean. And they did it.
So what changed with Yahusha? Because I totally understand what you're saying. Very much, I understand it. What changed with Yahusha? Because Yahusha then says, these bad apples, don't kick them out from your camp. Give them a chance.
Well, I just think myself that he was the perfect example out of his love and his compassion, his forgiveness, that nobody knew how to love and forgive and have compassion like he did. And that he came as an example. Give these people every possible chance that they have to turn their lives around, however it's going to be. He cast out demons. He cast out demons out of many people. He rose the dead. He was coming to show that if they would come into covenant with him, that there was power there to clean up their lives if they chose to do that. But we know in the end, there's going to be many that choose not to do that. And in the very end, he cannot save them because they haven't accepted him. If he took everyone into the kingdom with him that had not agreed to have him as their Elohim in their lives and on their hearts, sin's going to rise up again. And he said, sin will never rise up again. So that is the outcome, because our loving Creator gave everyone choice. Because he gave us choice, he now has to, and this is hard to understand, he has to give us ways to figure out how to stay with the good choices and not mix with the bad. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining this, because how do you explain the ways of Elohim? There's a sin problem here. And as long as the people were under him as their government, this was the way to keep the nation clean, even though it became very corrupt and they apostatized so much in the Old Testament. It's just one apostasy after another. We're there today.
Laws that they were supposed to follow as long as we're under him, because he was their king. They didn't have human kings,
No, they didn't.
and they didn't supposed to have human kings, I think, theoretically. Okay. But because we're talking about sin, Charlene, you're talking about sin. Maybe we shouldn't call it an everlasting covenant, because a time will come when sin will be no more. So these laws will be completely.
It is
Won't be stealing. So
Yeah.
I don't have to tell you how to deal with theft. I don't have to tell you how to deal with violence, with whatever, because there will be no more.
Yes. Oh, Tim, you're muted.
You're muted. But I'm sure you said something very interesting.
Well, maybe not, but if they're done away with, what is it that he's going to write in our minds? He says he's going to write his laws on our minds and our foreheads. So if they're done away with, what is he going to write in our minds?
Ah, good point. He writes them on our minds, therefore there is no sin.
Yep. But they're
Good
still
point.
there.
Yes, yes, of course, your point. You're right.
And we need to remember too,
Yeah.
if the people would have stayed in covenant and been obedient, there would have been no reason for those laws of you have to kill this person. If there was never any witches, they would have never had to worry about it. But they weren't in
Yeah,
covenant. They had broken the covenant. And so the covenant did come with that provision that we have to clean the camp here. And look what happened.
Great.
Saul. You know, there was no kings for at least about 500 years. They had just judges that were ruling them. But King Saul, he didn't clean out the witches. He even ended up going to the witch of Endor and losing his life. So
Yeah.
lots of disasters and consequences.
Sorry, but my battery is dying and I need to connect it. Tim, I think what you just said was I don't know how to. I can find the English word. I have a bunch of Greek expressions now in my head, and I can find one single English one. It was just the bow on the the wrapping.
If you want Hebrews, if you want
writes them in our hearts. Exactly. What does he write in our hearts? What does he write on our hearts? That doesn't exist anymore. It's not valid anymore. That's obsolete. That's what he writes in our hearts. No, clearly. Because it's valid, because they're valid rules. That's why he writes them in our hearts. So we never forget them. We're never confused.
You use the word bone.
Eh?
If you want to go for Hebrew, you say etzem.
Mhm.
And that word etzem is what describes Yahusha as the first fruit. It's the bone structure that holds the body together. So you're describing that perfectly as the bone. That bone structure is written in our minds through eternity.
That's going to be a wonderful day when that happens.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's the perfect ending.
Hmm.
And right now, I feel that all the previous conversation was completely unnecessary because that's the point. They are valid and eternal because they will be written, they're written in our hearts and they last forever in our hearts. That's why
why-
they're eternal.
And that's why the first commandment is the most important and the only one we really need to have. It says, and Yahuwah spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahuwah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other Elohim before me. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the only commandment that will ever be needed. Because when he's everything to us forever and ever,
That takes us right back to the very beginning of our conversation with the word bereshit. And that word sheet, garment. What is that garment? That's the garment of righteousness, of light that was put onto this earth at the very millisecond, if you will, that Yahuwah spoke it into fruition. That garment of light, righteousness was there. Ye are children of the light. If we are children of the light, that light is when we in his kingdom, that light is going to be flowing through our veins as light beyond our understanding of how to describe. And that righteousness imprinted in our being, and I have no words to describe it, that light imprinted in our beings will be flowing through our blood. It will exude from us. It will be who we are in that kingdom. It will be what we are. Isaiah told us if we want to know the ending, we need to know the beginning. 7 times he told us that. Bereshit, garment of light, of righteousness, right from the beginning. That's where we're going to end.
Tell that to a full preterist.
I love Revelation 14 because this is a perfect description of where we're going. Then I looked, and behold, a lamb standing on Mount Zion, with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. Sound familiar to Mount Sinai? And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps, and they sang, as it were, a new song. My question is, what's that new song? What are the words in that new song? They sing this new song before the throne, before the 4 living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. This is a very special group of people. Now listen. These are the ones who were not defiled with women. This is other churches. For they are virgins. They are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being firstfruits to Elohim and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of Elohim.
Let it be.
That's our journey. That's where we're headed.
Mm.
And
Right.
the words on earth as it is in heaven come to mind.
Yeah. Right. Okay, I think it's a good spot to end the recording.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Mhm.
Thank you, guys. As always. Great stuff.
Yeah.